The dust-caked stranger rode into Centralia, Washington on a Tuesday afternoon in July of 1882. His weathered face telling stories of 1,000 lonely trails and his eyes holding secrets he had no intention of sharing with anyone who might ask. Quinton Drake had been riding for 12 years, ever since the war ended, and he found himself unable to settle into the life his family expected of him back in Missouri. The mountains of Washington Territory suited him better than the flatlands of his youth, and he had made a reputation for himself as a man who could track anything, fix anything, and disappear before anyone got too curious about his past. He was 30 years old, lean and strong from years in the saddle, with dark hair that brushed his collar and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in 3 days. His gray eyes had a way of looking right through a person, seeing things they did not want seen. He guided his buckskin mare down the main street of Centralia, noting the usual establishments: a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, and at the far end of town, a white-painted church with a bell tower that caught the afternoon sun. Quinton had no particular business with churches, but he had learned long ago that every town revealed its character through its house of worship. This one looked well kept, loved even, which told him the people here had hope for something beyond their daily struggles. The boarding house proprietor, a widow named Mrs. Henderson, showed him to a clean room on the 2nd floor. "You planning on staying long?" she asked, her eyes assessing him with the practiced gaze of someone who had seen too many drifters pass through. "A week, maybe 2, Quinton replied, counting out coins from his worn leather pouch. "Need to rest my horse and resupply before heading north." "We serve breakfast at 7 and supper at 6, Mrs. Henderson said, pocketing the money. "No drinking, no gambling, and no women in the rooms." "This is a respectable establishment." Quinton nodded, already used to such rules. He had no intention of breaking them. He never stayed anywhere long enough to make trouble worth the effort. That evening he walked to the saloon for a drink and information. The bartender, a balding man with impressive mustaches, poured him a whiskey and leaned on the bar. "New in town, passing through," Quinton said, which was always his answer. "Looking for work. Depends on the work." The bartender gestured around the half-empty room. "Not much call for gunfighters here, if that is what you are after. We are a logging town mostly, some farming, peaceful the way folks like it." "Suits me fine," Quinton said, and he meant it. He had seen enough violence during the war and in the years after. These days he preferred the quiet. He might have left Centralia without incident. Just another nameless rider passing through another nameless town, if he had not decided to walk past the church on his way back to the boarding house. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of pine from the forests that surrounded the settlement, and something made him pause at the white picket fence that enclosed the churchyard. A woman stood in the garden beside the church, watering flowers with a tin can. The setting sun turned her honey-colored hair to gold, and even from a distance, Quinton could see the gentle concentration on her face as she tended each plant with care. She wore a simple blue dress that marked her as respectable but not wealthy, and when she straightened up, pressing a hand to the small of her back, he caught a glimpse of her profile. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with delicate features and an expression of such serene contentment that it made something in his chest tighten unexpectedly. As if sensing his presence, she turned and looked directly at him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the fence, strangers in the fading light. Then she smiled, a warm and open expression that held no suspicion or fear, only friendly curiosity. "Good evening," she called out, setting down her watering can. "You must be the traveler Mrs. Henderson mentioned. Welcome to Centralia." Quinton touched the brim of his hat, suddenly aware of his dusty clothes and unshaven face. "Thank you, madam. I did not mean to disturb you." "You are not disturbing me at all," she said, walking closer to the fence. Up close, she was even prettier, with green eyes that sparkled with intelligence and a sprinkling of freckles across her nose. "I am Amelia Grace. My uncle is the preacher here, Reverend Thomas Grace. I help him with the church and the congregation." "Quinton Drake," he said, then found himself adding, "It is a beautiful garden." Her smile widened. "Thank you. I find that tending growing things helps me think and pray. There is something peaceful about working with the earth, do not you think?" Quinton thought about all the trails he had ridden, all the camps he had made under open skies. "I suppose there is," he agreed, "though I have spent more time sleeping on the ground than making anything grow in it." Amelia laughed, a light and genuine sound. "Well, you are welcome to visit the garden any time you are in town. We have services on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings if you are interested. My uncle always says that everyone is welcome in God's house." "I will keep that in mind," Quinton said, knowing he would probably be gone before Sunday came. He touched his hat again. "Good evening, Miss Grace." "Good evening, Mr. Drake," she replied, watching as he walked away. Back in his room at the boarding house, Quinton found himself thinking about Amelia Grace in a way he had not thought about a woman in years. He had known women, of course, in the way that lonely men on the trail knew women when they passed through towns and needed comfort for a night. But there was something different about the preacher's niece, something that stirred feelings he had long since buried beneath the dust and distance of his wandering life. He told himself it was nothing, that he would leave Centralia in a week and forget her face like he had forgotten so many others. But that night, he dreamed of honey-colored hair and green eyes, and woke with a strange ache in his chest that had nothing to do with old wounds or hard sleeping. The next morning, Quinton took his mare to the livery stable for a proper grooming and new shoes. The blacksmith, a young man named Peter, worked with quick efficiency while chatting about the town and its people. "Reverend Grace is a good man," Peter said when Quinton mentioned seeing the church. "Came here about 5 years ago with his niece. Her parents died in a fire back in Ohio, and he took her in when she was just a girl. She has been a blessing to this town, helping with the sick and teaching the children to read. Everyone loves Miss Amelia." "She seems kind," Quinton said carefully, not wanting to reveal too much interest. "Kind does not begin to cover it," Peter said, hammering a nail into the horseshoe with practiced precision. "Last winter, when the Johnsons lost their barn in a storm, Miss Amelia organized the whole town to help rebuild. She cooked meals, watched their children, even helped with the construction herself. And when old Mr. Porter was dying, she sat with him every night so his wife could rest. That is just the kind of person she is." Quinton felt the ache in his chest grow stronger. A woman like that deserved a good man, someone who could put down roots and build a life. Not a drifter with nothing to his name but a horse, a gun, and too many memories he wanted to forget. He spent the day checking his supplies and mending his gear, trying not to think about Amelia Grace. But that evening, his feet carried him past the church again, and there she was, sitting on the front steps with a basket of mending in her lap. The evening light painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and she looked up with that same warm smile when she saw him approaching. "Mr. Drake," she said, setting aside her sewing. "Out for another evening walk? Seems that way," he said, stopping at the fence. "Do you always work this late?" "My uncle says idle hands are the devil's workshop," she replied with a hint of amusement. "Besides, I enjoy being useful. There is always something that needs doing." "You should rest sometimes too," Quinton said, surprising himself with the concern in his voice. Amelia tilted her head, studying him with those perceptive green eyes. "You sound like someone who does not rest much himself." "Different circumstances," he said. "I rest when I can. You have a home, a community. You should enjoy it." "I do enjoy it," she said softly. "Very much. This town, these people, they are my family. I cannot imagine living anywhere else or doing anything else with my life." She paused, then added, "What about you, Mr. Drake? Do you have family waiting for you somewhere?" "No," he said, the word coming out more harshly than he intended. "No family." If she noticed his tone, she did not show it. Instead, she stood and walked to the fence, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "That must be lonely," she said gently, "riding from place to place with no one waiting for you." "It is the life I chose," Quinton said, but even as he spoke the words, they felt less true than they once had. "We always have choices," Amelia said. "But sometimes we keep making the same choice out of habit, not because it is what we truly want." Her insight unsettled him. "You are very wise for someone so young." "I am 23, she said with a slight smile. "Old enough to have learned a few things about people and life. And you are not so old yourself, I would guess." 30, perhaps. 30 exactly, he confirmed. "But I have lived a lot of years in that time." "I can see that," she said, her gaze moving over his weathered features. "The question is, Mr. Drake, what are you running from?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. Most people did not ask such things, content to let strangers remain mysterious. But Amelia Grace was not most people. "What makes you think I am running?" "Because men who are content with their lives do not have eyes like yours," she said simply. "Eyes that are always looking at the horizon, searching for something they cannot name." Quinton felt exposed in a way that no amount of physical danger had ever made him feel. "Maybe I am searching," he admitted. "Maybe I do not even know what for anymore." "Then perhaps you should stop running long enough to find out," Amelia said. She reached over the fence and touched his hand briefly, a gesture that sent warmth shooting up his arm. "You are welcome here, Mr. Drake, in this town, at this church, for as long as you need to stay." Before he could respond, the church door opened and an older man emerged. He was tall and thin, with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded Quinton immediately of his niece. "Amelia, are you finished with the mending? Mrs. Patterson is asking after those tablecloths." "Almost, Uncle Thomas," Amelia said, stepping back from the fence. "I was just welcoming our visitor to town. Uncle, this is Mr. Quinton Drake. Mr. Drake, my uncle, Reverend Thomas Grace." The Reverend came down the steps, extending his hand to Quinton. "Mr. Drake, welcome to Centralia. I hope you have found our town hospitable." "Very much so," Quinton said, shaking the offered hand. The Reverend had a firm grip and a measuring gaze that was not unkind but certainly assessing. "Amelia mentioned you are passing through. What line of work are you in, if I may ask?" "I do whatever needs doing," Quinton said carefully. "Tracking, sometimes scouting, ranch work when I can find it. I have been told I am good with my hands." "A useful skill," Reverend Grace said. "As it happens, we could use someone with such skills." "The church roof has been leaking in the back corner, and none of us have quite figured out how to fix it properly. Would you be willing to take a look? I can pay you for your time." Quinton hesitated. Taking work meant staying longer, getting more entangled with this town and its people. Getting more entangled with Amelia Grace, whose green eyes were watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "Please, Mr. Drake," Amelia said. "It would be a great help. The rain gets into the storage room where we keep the hymnals and linens." He should say no. He should finish resupplying, rest his horse another day or two, and move on. That was what he always did. But instead, he heard himself saying, "I will take a look tomorrow morning, see what needs to be done." The smile Amelia gave him made his heart do something strange in his chest, and he knew he was in trouble. The next morning, Quinton arrived at the church with his tools and a ladder borrowed from the livery stable. Reverend Grace showed him to the problem area, then left him to work while he attended to his pastoral duties. Quinton climbed onto the roof, grateful for the physical labor that would keep his mind occupied. The problem was easy enough to identify. Several shingles had come loose, and water was seeping through during rainstorms. He set to work removing the damaged shingles and replacing them with new ones, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of manual labor. He had been working for about an hour when he heard a voice from below. "Mr. Drake, I brought you some water and biscuits." He looked down to see Amelia standing at the base of the ladder, holding a basket and shading her eyes with one hand as she looked up at him. "That is kind of you," he called down. "I will be down in a moment." He climbed down and accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply. The morning was already warm and the work had made him thirsty. Amelia watched him with an expression that was half amusement, half something else. "You look more comfortable up on that roof than most men would," she observed. "I have done a lot of different work over the years," Quinton said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "You learn to be comfortable with whatever needs doing." "Still, it is kind of you to help us," Amelia said. She gestured to a bench in the shade of a large oak tree. "Come sit for a moment. You should not work through the heat of the day without rest." They sat together on the bench, and Amelia handed him a biscuit from the basket. It was still warm, flaky, and buttery, clearly made fresh that morning. "Did you make these?" he asked. "I did," she confirmed. "I enjoy baking. My mother taught me before she died. She said that feeding people was an act of love, and I have always remembered that." "Tell me about her," Quinton said, surprising himself with the question. He was not usually one for personal conversations, but something about Amelia made him want to know more. A soft, sad smile crossed her face. "She was wonderful, kind and patient and always singing. My father used to say she could make sunshine on the cloudiest day. They were so in love, even after 18 years of marriage. You could see it in the way they looked at each other, the way they always reached for each other's hands." "How did they die?" Quinton asked gently. "A fire," Amelia said, her voice steady but quiet. "I was 15. I had gone to town to help a neighbor with her new baby. When I came home, the house was burning. They said my father had been working in his study when the lamp fell. He and my mother both died in the flames." She was silent for a moment, then added, "Uncle Thomas came for me the moment he heard. He brought me here and gave me a home and a purpose. I owe him everything." "You were very young to lose so much," Quinton said, feeling the familiar weight of old grief in his own chest. "We all lose things," Amelia said, turning to look at him. "You have lost things too, I think. I can see it in your eyes." Quinton looked away, focusing on the half-eaten biscuit in his hand. "I had a brother," he said finally, words he had not spoken aloud in years. "His name was Samuel. He died at Antietam, shot through the chest while leading a charge. He was 20 years old." "I am so sorry," Amelia said, and the genuine sympathy in her voice made his throat tighten. "I was supposed to be with him," Quinton continued, unable to stop now that he had started. "But I was on a different part of the line. I did not even know he was dead until 3 days later. I never got to say goodbye, never got to tell him." He stopped, swallowing hard. Amelia reached over and took his hand, her fingers warm and soft against his calloused palm. "Tell him what?" "That he was the better man," Quinton said quietly. "That he should have been the one to survive, not me. He had a girl waiting for him back home, plans for a future. All I had was anger and a gun." "And yet you are the one who lived," Amelia said firmly. "That must mean something, Mr. Drake. Perhaps you survived because you still have something important to do with your life." I have been trying to figure out what that might be for 12 years, Quinton said with a bitter laugh. Maybe you have been looking in the wrong places, Amelia suggested. She squeezed his hand gently before releasing it. Or maybe you just needed to stop running long enough to see what was right in front of you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Quinton found himself feeling more at peace than he had in longer than he could remember. Finally, Amelia stood. I should let you get back to work. The day is not getting any cooler. Thank you for the food, Quinton said, and for listening. Anytime, she said with a smile. That is what friends do. Friends, the word echoed in his mind as he climbed back onto the roof. When was the last time he had called anyone a friend? When was the last time he had wanted to? He worked through the afternoon, replacing shingles and sealing joints, making sure the repair would last through many winters. From his vantage point on the roof, he could see most of Centralia spread out below him. It was a small town, perhaps 200 people, but it had a solid, established feel to it. The buildings were well maintained, the streets clean. Children played in yards while their mothers hung laundry. Men worked in the mill at the edge of town, the sound of sawing wood a constant backdrop. It was the kind of town where people put down roots, raised families, built lives. The kind of town Quinton had been avoiding for 12 years, because settling down meant facing all the things he had been running from. But as he watched Amelia emerge from the church and walk to the school building next door, her arms full of books, he found himself wondering what it might be like to stay. To wake up in the same place every morning, to know his neighbors' names, to have someone waiting for him at the end of the day, to have Amelia Grace waiting for him. The thought was dangerous, he knew. He had nothing to offer a woman like her. No land, no money, no prospects. Just a worn saddle, a tired horse, and a past full of ghosts. She deserved better than a wandering cowboy who could not even promise to stay more than a week. But the thought would not leave him, and when he finished the roof repair and climbed down to find Amelia waiting for him with another basket of food, this time containing a proper dinner, he could not help the way his heart lifted at the sight of her. I thought you might be hungry after all that work, she said, leading him back to the bench under the oak tree. I made too much for just Uncle Thomas and me, and Mrs. Henderson said you did not come back for the boarding house dinner. The basket contained fried chicken, fresh bread, butter, pickles, and apple pie. It was more food than Quinton usually ate in 2 days. This is too much, he protested weakly, but his stomach betrayed him with a loud rumble. Amelia laughed. Please eat. I hate to see food go to waste, and you worked hard today. You have earned a good meal. They ate together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Amelia asked him about his travels, and Quinton found himself telling her stories he had not thought about in years. The time he tracked a mountain lion for 3 days through the Rockies. The summer he worked on a ranch in Montana and helped deliver twin calves during a thunderstorm. The old prospector he had met in Nevada, who claimed to know where the real mother lode was hidden, and showed him mountains that glowed gold in the sunset. Amelia listened with rapt attention, asking questions and laughing at the funny parts. You have seen so much, she said wistfully. I have never been more than 50 miles from this town. Do you want to travel? Quinton asked. She considered the question carefully. I think I would like to see more of the world someday, but not alone. I would want to share it with someone, to have someone to turn to and say, do you see that? Is that not wonderful? Experiences are richer when they are shared. That is wise, Quinton said, thinking of all the beautiful things he had seen alone, all the sunsets and mountain vistas that had felt hollow because there was no one beside him to appreciate them. What about you? Amelia asked. Do you prefer the solitude? Is that why you keep moving? I do not know any more, Quinton admitted. I started moving because I could not stand to stay still, could not stand to be in one place with all the memories. But now the moving is just habit. I do not know if I am running towards something or away from it. Then maybe it is time to stop and find out, Amelia said, echoing her words from the night before. She stood and began gathering the empty dishes. The roof looks wonderful, by the way. Uncle Thomas checked it this afternoon and was very impressed. It should last you a good while, Quinton said, standing as well. As long as you keep an eye on it and replace any loose shingles before they cause trouble. Will you be here to do that? Amelia asked, her voice carefully casual. Or will you be moving on soon? Quinton looked at her, at the hope and hesitation in her green eyes, and felt something shift inside him. I do not know, he said honestly. I did not plan on staying, but I find myself reluctant to leave. Then do not, Amelia said simply. Stay a while longer. There is always work for a man with your skills, and I think you might find that Centralia is a good place to catch your breath. Is that what I need? To catch my breath? I think you have been running on empty for a long time, Quinton Drake, she said, using his first name for the first time. The sound of it on her lips made his chest tighten. I think you need to rest and let people care about you, and maybe learn that staying in one place does not mean drowning in memories. It can mean building new ones. She left him standing under the oak tree, his hands full of empty dishes and his head full of dangerous possibilities. The next few days fell into an unexpected pattern. Quinton found small jobs around town, fixing a broken wagon wheel for the blacksmith, helping the general store owner build new shelves, repairing the fence around the schoolyard. Each evening, he found himself at the church, ostensibly to check on the roof repair, but really to see Amelia. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about her work teaching the children to read, about the women's circle she organized that made quilts for new mothers, about her dreams of one day having a family of her own. He told her about the places he had been, the people he had met, the lessons he had learned on the long and lonely trail. You should write these stories down, Amelia said one evening as they sat in the church garden, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. They are too good to be lost. I am not much of a writer, Quinton said, never had much schooling. You tell them well enough, Amelia said. And besides, it is not about perfect grammar, it is about preserving something important. Your experiences, your perspective, they matter. Why? Quinton asked. I am just a cowboy who has been drifting for too long. You are more than that, Amelia said fiercely. You are a good man, Quinton, a kind man. You may not see it, but I do. Everyone in this town who has met you sees it. You work hard, you treat people with respect, you help without expecting anything in return. That is not nothing. Her words stirred something in him, something that felt dangerously like hope. Amelia, he said, then stopped, not sure what he wanted to say. She looked at him, her face soft in the fading light. Yes. Why are you being so kind to me? You barely know me. I know enough, she said. And as for why, maybe I see someone who needs a friend, someone who has been alone for too long. She paused, then added quietly, or maybe I just like you and want you to stay. The honesty in her words took his breath away. You should not, he said roughly. Like me, I mean, I am no good for you, Amelia. I have nothing to offer, no future to promise. I am not asking for promises, Amelia said, moving closer to him on the bench. I am just asking you to stay a little longer, to give this town a chance, to give yourself a chance. And if I do, if I stay and then have to leave anyway, what then? Then at least we will have had this time, Amelia said. I would rather have a few weeks of your friendship than a lifetime of wondering what might have been. Quinton looked at her, at the conviction in her eyes, and felt his resistance crumbling. He had been so certain that he needed to keep moving, that staying in one place would destroy him. But being with Amelia did not feel like drowning in memories. It felt like learning to breathe again. "You are a dangerous woman, Amelia Grace," he said, but there was no heat in his words, only a kind of wondering affection. "Only to men who are afraid of being happy," she replied with a smile. Then, before he could respond, she leaned in and kissed his cheek, a soft and brief touch that seared through him like lightning. "Think about it, Quinton. Really think about what you want, not what you think you should want." She left him in the garden, his hand pressed to his cheek where her lips had been, his heart pounding like he had just run a mile. Sunday came, and Quinton surprised himself by attending the church service. He sat in the back row, uncomfortable in his cleanest shirt, watching as Reverend Grace delivered a sermon about second chances and the power of redemption. The congregation sang hymns with enthusiasm, their voices rising in harmony, and Quinton found himself moved by the sense of community, the way these people clearly cared for each other. Amelia sat in the front row with a group of children, helping them follow along in the hymnals. She wore a yellow dress that made her look like sunshine, and when she glanced back and saw him, her face lit up with such genuine joy that he felt it like a physical warmth. After the service, Reverend Grace invited him to Sunday dinner. "Amelia has been cooking all morning," he said with a knowing smile, "and she made apple pie, which I am told is your favorite." "I may have mentioned that," Quinton admitted, feeling his face heat. "Then you must join us," the Reverend said. "I insist." The parsonage attached to the church was small but comfortable, filled with books and the smell of good cooking. Amelia had set the table with care, and the meal she served was delicious. Roast chicken, potatoes, green beans from the garden, fresh bread, and yes, apple pie. Reverend Grace proved to be excellent company, full of stories about the town and its people. He asked Quinton about his travels but did not pry into painful subjects, and Quinton found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did around strangers. "Amelia tells me you have been quite helpful around town," the Reverend said as they finished the meal. "Peter at the livery cannot stop talking about how you helped him repair his forge, and Mrs. Patterson is thrilled with the shelves you built." "Just small jobs," Quinton said. "Nothing special." "Service is always special," Reverend Grace said, "especially when given freely. You have a good heart, Mr. Drake." "Uncle Thomas," Amelia said, standing to clear the plates, "stop embarrassing poor Quinton." "I am merely stating facts," the Reverend said with a smile. He stood as well. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have some reading to do for next week's sermon. Amelia, why do not you show Mr. Drake the new books that came in from Seattle? I know he mentioned an interest in poetry." It was a transparent excuse to give them time alone, and from the smile on the Reverend's face, he knew they knew it. But Quinton found he did not mind. Any time with Amelia was time well spent. The church's small library was in a room off the main sanctuary. Amelia lit a lamp against the gathering afternoon shadows and showed Quinton the new arrivals, volumes of Whitman, Dickinson, and Longfellow, along with several novels and historical texts. "Uncle Thomas orders them from Seattle," Amelia explained. "He believes that a mind is like a garden. It needs constant tending and new seeds to flourish." "He is a wise man," Quinton said, running his fingers over the leather spines. "My brother used to read poetry. He would recite it around the campfire during the war. I never understood it then, but I wish I had paid more attention." "It is not too late to learn," Amelia said. She pulled down a volume of Whitman and opened it to a marked page. "Listen to this. 'I am large, I contain multitudes.' Is that not beautiful? The idea that we are all more than we seem, that we hold entire worlds inside ourselves. You are the poet, not me, Quinton said, but he was touched by her passion. Everyone is a poet, Amelia insisted. We just use different languages. You tell your stories through action and experiences. I tell mine through words and care for others. But we are both trying to express the same thing. That life matters, that connection matters, that love matters. She said the word love so naturally, as if it was not terrifying and huge and impossible. Quinton looked at her, at the earnest expression on her face, and felt something break open inside him. Amelia, he said, his voice rough, I am not a good bet. I have no land, no steady income. I have been drifting for 12 years, running from ghosts. You could do so much better than me. Better than a man who is kind and skilled and hurting and trying his best to heal. Amelia set down the book and took his hands in hers. Better than someone who makes me laugh and think and feel more alive than I have in years. I do not want better, Quinton. I want you. You barely know me, he protested weakly, but his hands tightened around hers. I know enough, she said. I know you are good with your hands and your heart. I know you listen when people talk. I know you help without being asked. I know you have been hurt and you are scared of being hurt again. And I know that when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I have never felt before. I look at you and I see everything I thought I could never have, Quinton admitted. A home, a purpose, someone to care about. It terrifies me. Why? Because what if I fail? What if I stay and then the restlessness comes back? What if I am not capable of being the man you need me to be? Amelia stepped closer, so close he could see the gold flecks in her eyes, smell the lavender soap she used. What if you succeed? What if you stay and find out that you are exactly where you are supposed to be? What if you are capable of more than you ever imagined? You have a lot of faith in me, Quinton said. I have faith in what I see, Amelia replied. And I see a good man who deserves to be happy. The question is, do you believe you deserve it too? It was the question he had been avoiding for 12 years. Did he deserve happiness after his brother died? Did he deserve a home after he had run from the one he had? Did he deserve love after all the ways he had failed? Looking into Amelia's eyes, he found himself wanting to believe that the answer might be yes. I want to try, he said finally, the words feeling like a leap off a cliff. I want to stay and see if I can be the man you think I am, but I need you to be patient with me. I am not good at this. None of us are good at love in the beginning, Amelia said with a radiant smile. We learn as we go, together. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him, a real kiss this time, soft and sweet and full of promise. Quinton wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, feeling the rightness of it settle into his bones. For the first time in 12 years, he felt like he was home. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Quinton rested his forehead against hers. You are worth settling down for, he said softly. Worth more than anything I have ever known. And you are worth taking a chance on, Amelia replied, her hands cupping his face. Worth believing in. From the other room, Reverend Grace called out, I hope you found those poetry books interesting. They broke apart, laughing, and Quinton felt lighter than he had in years. We should tell him, he said. He already knows, Amelia said with a grin. Why do you think he left us alone? They emerged from the library to find the Reverend pretending to read, a knowing smile on his face. Good books? He asked innocently. Very good, Quinton said, taking Amelia's hand in his. Sir, I would like your permission to court your niece properly. Reverend Grace set down his book, his expression turning serious. Mr. Drake, I have been watching you these past weeks. I have seen how you work, how you treat people, how you look at Amelia. I have also seen how she looks at you, and I have not seen her this happy in all the years she has been with me. He stood and extended his hand. You have my blessing with one condition. Anything, Quinton said, shaking his hand. "Do not break her heart. She has lost enough in her life. If you are going to stay, really stay. Put down roots, build a life. If you are going to leave, tell her now before either of you get hurt worse." "I am staying," Quinton said, and as he spoke the words he felt the truth of them. "I am done running. If she will have me, I want to build a life here, with her." "That is all I needed to hear," Reverend Grace said, his stern expression melting into warmth. "Welcome to the family, son." The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness that Quinton had never experienced before. He rented a small cabin on the edge of town and took on steady work at the mill, his skills with tools and wood making him valuable to the operation. The work was hard but satisfying, and having a regular paycheck felt strange and wonderful after so many years of drifting. Every evening after work, he would wash up and walk to the church, where Amelia would be waiting. They would walk together through the town, talking and laughing, learning each other in the way of new couples. He learned that she hated the taste of coffee but loved tea with honey, that she sang to herself when she thought no one was listening, that she had a temper when she saw injustice, fierce and protective of anyone she perceived as vulnerable, that she dreamed of having 5 children and a house with a big kitchen where everyone would always be welcome. She learned that he was quieter in the mornings, needing time to ease into conversation, that he had nightmares sometimes, waking with his brother's name on his lips, that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he felt comfortable, that he loved the smell of rain on pine trees and the sound of wind through mountains, that he had never allowed himself to dream of a future because dreaming had always hurt too much. "Dream now," Amelia urged him one evening as they sat by the river that ran past town, watching the sunset paint the water gold. "Dream with me." "What do you want from life?" "I want this," Quinton said simply. "You and me building something together, a home, a family. I want to wake up next to you every morning and know that I am exactly where I belong." "That sounds perfect," Amelia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "What else?" Quinton thought for a moment. "I want to be a good man, the kind of man my brother would have been proud of. The kind of man who contributes to his community and raises his children right and loves his wife the way she deserves to be loved." "You are already that man," Amelia said softly. "You just needed to believe it." As summer turned to fall, Quinton proposed. He did not have a fancy ring, just a simple gold band he had bought from the general store with his saved wages. But he had words, and Amelia had taught him that words mattered. He took her to the church garden, to the bench where they had first sat together, where she had first suggested he might want to stop running. The evening was cool, the air smelling of autumn leaves and wood smoke from distant chimneys. "Amelia Grace," he said, taking her hands in his. "3 months ago, I rode into this town planning to stay a week. I was running from my past, from my pain, from myself. And then I met you, and everything changed. You made me want to stop running. You made me believe that I could be more than my mistakes and my grief. You made me want to be a better man." Amelia's eyes were already shining with tears, but she smiled at him, squeezing his hands. "I do not have much to offer," Quinton continued, "but I have my hands that will work for you every day. I have my heart that loves you more than I thought possible. And I have my promise that I will stay, that I will build a life with you, that I will never give you cause to doubt my devotion. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Amelia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the simple ring onto her finger and she looked at it as if it were made of diamonds. "It is perfect," she said. "You are perfect." "I am far from perfect," Quinton said, pulling her into his arms, "but I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You already are," Amelia said, and kissed him with such love and promise that Quinton felt the last of his old wounds begin to heal. They were married 6 weeks later, on a crisp October morning with the mountains ablaze with fall color. The entire town came to the wedding, cramming into the church that Quinton had repaired, bringing food and gifts and good wishes. Amelia wore a simple white dress that her uncle had saved from her mother's wedding, and Quinton wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed and his face clean-shaven. As he stood at the altar, watching Amelia walk down the aisle on her uncle's arm, Quinton felt a presence beside him, as real as if his brother Samuel stood there. For the first time in 12 years, the thought of his brother did not bring crushing grief but a bittersweet warmth. He knew Samuel would have approved, would have been happy for him. "Thank you," he whispered silently to his brother, to God, to whatever force had brought him to Centralia, and to Amelia. "Thank you for giving me another chance." Reverend Grace performed the ceremony with tears in his eyes, his voice steady as he pronounced them husband and wife. When Quinton kissed his bride, the church erupted in cheers and applause, and he felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. The reception was held in the church hall, with tables laden with food and a fiddle player providing music for dancing. Quinton, who had not danced since before the war, found himself swept onto the floor by his new wife, who laughed at his rusty steps and guided him patiently. "You are terrible at this," she said affectionately. "I am," he agreed, "but I will get better. I have a good teacher and a lifetime to practice." "A lifetime," Amelia echoed, her eyes soft. "I like the sound of that." They danced until sunset, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had welcomed Quinton into their community with open arms. He met the families he had worked for, the children Amelia taught, the elderly couples she helped with household tasks. All of them had stories about Amelia's kindness, her generosity, her unwavering faith in people's goodness. "You are a lucky man," Peter the blacksmith said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Miss Amelia is 1 in a million." "I know," Quinton said, watching his wife laugh with a group of children who had brought her flowers. "Believe me, I know." As the evening grew late, Quinton and Amelia slipped away to the cabin he had been preparing for weeks. He had built new furniture, painted the walls, and added a front porch where they could sit and watch the mountains. It was not much, but it was theirs, the first real home he had owned since leaving Missouri 12 years ago. He carried Amelia over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Drake," he said. "Welcome home, Mr. Drake," Amelia replied, winding her arms around his neck. "How does it feel?" "Right," Quinton said simply. "For the first time in my life, everything feels right." They spent their first night as husband and wife, talking quietly in the darkness, sharing dreams and fears and promises. Quinton told her about the house he wanted to build for her one day, bigger than this cabin, with room for all those children she dreamed of. Amelia told him about the garden she wanted to plant, flowers and vegetables and herbs for healing. "We have time for all of it," she said, curled against his side, her hand over his heart. "We have the rest of our lives." "The rest of our lives," Quinton repeated, marveling at the concept, a future stretching out before him, not empty and aimless but full of purpose and love. "I never thought I would have this." "Now you do," Amelia said. "Now we both do." The first year of marriage was an adjustment, but a happy one. Quinton learned the rhythms of domestic life, the small intimacies of sharing space and time with another person. Amelia learned his moods and triggers, recognizing when he needed to talk and when he needed silence, when the memories of war and loss grew too heavy, and he needed her gentle presence to anchor him back to the present. They worked together to expand the cabin, Quinton building and Amelia decorating, turning the small space into a real home. She planted her garden in the spring, and he built her raised beds and a trellis for climbing beans. They hosted dinners for friends and neighbors, attended church every Sunday, participated in town events and barn raisings and harvest festivals. Quinton found himself becoming part of the community in a way he had never expected. Men sought his advice on repairs and building projects. Women brought him broken tools and furniture to fix. Children followed him around the mill, fascinated by his work. He was no longer a wandering stranger but Quinton Drake, Amelia's husband, a valued member of Centralia. The nightmares about the war came less frequently, and when they did, Amelia would wake him gently, hold him while he trembled, remind him that he was safe and loved and home. Slowly, the past lost its power over him, becoming something he had survived rather than something that defined him. "You are healing," Amelia said one night after a particularly bad dream, stroking his hair as he caught his breath. "I can see it happening day by day. You are letting go of the guilt and the grief and learning to live again." "Because of you," Quinton said. "You saved me, Amelia. I was drowning and I did not even know it, and you pulled me to shore." "We saved each other," Amelia corrected gently. "I was lonely too, you know. I had my work and my uncle in this town, but I was lonely. I wanted someone to share my life with, someone to dream with. You gave me that." "I will keep giving it to you," Quinton promised. "Every day for the rest of my life." In the spring of their second year of marriage, Amelia told him she was pregnant. Quinton received the news with a mixture of joy and terror, suddenly aware of how much he had to lose, how vulnerable happiness could make a person. "What if I am a terrible father?" he asked, pacing the cabin while Amelia sat calmly at the table. "What if I do not know how to raise a child properly? What if something happens to you during the birth?" "Quinton," Amelia said firmly, standing and taking his hands to stop his pacing. "You will be a wonderful father because you care enough to worry about it. And as for the birth, women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am strong and healthy. We will be fine. Promise me," he said, his voice breaking. "Promise you will be careful." "I promise," Amelia said, pulling him into her arms. "I am not going anywhere. We have too many plans, remember? 5 children and a big kitchen and a lifetime of dreams to fulfill. This is just the beginning." Pregnancy suited Amelia. She glowed with health and happiness, her already considerable energy seeming to multiply as she prepared for the baby's arrival. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets, prepared the small room off their bedroom as a nursery, and continued her work with the church and community until the very last weeks. Quinton became ridiculously protective, insisting she rest more than she thought necessary, carrying anything heavier than a book, and hovering in a way that made her both touched and exasperated. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. "I know," Quinton said sheepishly, "but I cannot help it. You are carrying our child, the most precious thing in the world to me." Amelia softened, reaching up to cup his face. "And you are the most precious thing to me, but you need to let me live my life. I am fine, Quinton, better than fine. I am happier than I have ever been." He tried to relax, but it was difficult. Every day, he thanked whatever higher power had brought him to Centralia, to Amelia, to this life he had never imagined he could have. And every day, he worked hard at the mill and on their growing property, determined to provide for his family and prove himself worthy of the gifts he had been given. Their son was born on a cold December night in 1883, with Reverend Grace pacing outside and Quinton holding Amelia's hand through every contraction. The local midwife, Mrs. Potter, had delivered half the babies in Centralia and knew exactly what to do, but Quinton still felt helpless watching Amelia in pain. "You are doing so well," he kept saying, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You are the strongest, bravest woman I know." "Tell me something," Amelia gasped between contractions. "Tell me a story to distract me." So Quinton told her about the first time he saw a mountain lion, tracking it through snow in the high country, the beauty and danger of the encounter. He told her about helping a lost child find her way home during a blizzard, and the gratitude of her parents. He told her about the sunset he saw from a mountain peak in Montana, colors he did not have words to describe. And as he spoke, Amelia gripped his hand and breathed through the pain, and finally, as dawn broke, their son entered the world with a healthy cry. "You have a boy," Mrs. Potter announced, placing the squirming, red-faced baby in Amelia's arms. "A big, healthy boy." Quinton looked at his wife holding their child, both of them crying, and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are both perfect. We have a son," Amelia said wonderingly, tears streaming down her face. "Quinton, we have a son." They named him Samuel, after the brother Quinton had lost. Reverend Grace baptized him in the church while the entire town looked on, and Quinton held his son carefully, marveling at the tiny fingers and miniature features. "Your uncle would be proud," Amelia said that night as they lay in bed, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. "To know you named your son after him, to see the man you have become." "I hope so," Quinton said. "I hope he is watching somehow, seeing that I made something good out of my life after all." "He is," Amelia said with certainty, "and he is proud. I am sure of it." Fatherhood changed Quinton in ways he had not expected. Holding Samuel, watching him sleep, seeing him smile for the first time, all of it cracked open something inside him. He understood, finally, what his parents must have felt, what Samuel's fiancée had lost when his brother died. He understood the terrible vulnerability of love, and also its incredible strength. He was a devoted father, rising with Amelia for night feedings, walking the floors when Samuel was fussy, making silly faces to earn a laugh. He built toys and a small cradle that rocked smoothly, and when Samuel was old enough, he would carry him around the property, showing him the garden and the chickens and the distant mountains. "See that," he would say, pointing. "That is where your father used to wander before he found your mother and learned what home really meant." Amelia would watch them from the porch, her hand resting on her stomach where another child was growing, and feel a contentment so deep it almost frightened her. This was the life she had dreamed of, the family she had prayed for. And every day she thanked God for the wandering cowboy who had ridden into town and decided to stay. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose Grace, was born in the fall of 1885. She had her mother's green eyes and honey-colored hair, and from the moment she arrived, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "I am in trouble," Quinton said, holding his newborn daughter while Samuel, now nearly 2, peered curiously at his sister. "I will never be able to say no to this one." "You already cannot say no to her brother," Amelia pointed out with amusement, watching Samuel climb into Quinton's lap, clearly determined not to be left out. "True enough," Quinton admitted, managing to hold both children, his arms full of the family he had never expected to have. "But I have no regrets." The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Quinton built the bigger house he had promised Amelia, a solid 2-story structure with a spacious kitchen and enough bedrooms for the growing family. They had 2 more children, another son named Thomas after Amelia's uncle, and a daughter named Lily. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and asking endless questions. Rose was spirited and adventurous, always climbing trees and exploring the forests around their home. Thomas was gentle and kind, with a gift for music that delighted his great-uncle, the Reverend. And Lily was bright and funny, keeping the entire family laughing with her antics. Quinton loved them all fiercely, this family he had built with Amelia. He taught his sons to work with wood and metal, to track animals through the forest, to shoot straight and ride well. He taught his daughters the same things, ignoring the neighbors who thought it improper for girls to learn such skills. They should know how to take care of themselves, he insisted to Amelia when she mentioned the gossip. The world is not always kind to women. I want them to be strong and capable. Like their mother, Amelia said with a smile, perfectly understanding his reasoning. Exactly like their mother, Quinton agreed. Amelia taught all the children to read and write, to cook and garden, to think critically and care for others. She involved them in church activities and community service, instilling in them the same values of kindness and generosity that guided her own life. Together, Quinton and Amelia built more than a house. They built a home filled with love and laughter, traditions and memories. They hosted Christmas dinners that the entire neighborhood attended. They held summer picnics by the river where children played and adults talked late into the evening. They opened their door to anyone who needed help, taking in a young widow and her children for 6 months after a house fire, helping a new family from back east get established in town. Reverend Grace, growing older but no less devoted to his flock, watched his niece's family with pride. "You have done well," he told Amelia one Sunday after service. "Your parents would be so proud of the woman you have become, the life you have built." "I had good teachers," Amelia said, hugging her uncle, "and I found the right partner." "You did indeed," Reverend Grace agreed, watching Quinton corral their 4 children who were trying to sneak cookies from the social hall before dinner. "He is a good man. I knew it from the start, even when he did not know it himself." "He just needed someone to believe in him," Amelia said. "Someone to show him that his past did not have to define his future. And he needed to believe he was worth loving," Reverend Grace added. "That was always the hardest part for him." As the children grew older, Quinton told them stories about his wandering days, but he framed them carefully, making sure they understood that while he valued those experiences, what he valued most was choosing to stop running and build a life. "Why did you stop?" Samuel asked one evening when he was about 10, sitting with his father on the porch while the sun set. "You could have kept traveling, seen more of the world." "Because I found something worth staying for," Quinton said, gesturing toward the house where Amelia was putting the younger children to bed. "Your mother, this family, this life. All the mountains and sunsets in the world are not worth anything if you have no one to share them with." "But you gave up your freedom," Samuel persisted, trying to understand. "No, son," Quinton said seriously. "I found my freedom. I was not free when I was running. I was trapped by my grief and my guilt and my fear. Real freedom is being able to stay in one place because you choose to, because you have found where you belong. Real freedom is loving people so much that their happiness matters more than your own restlessness." Samuel thought about this, his young face serious. "I think I understand." "You will understand even better when you are older," Quinton said, ruffling his son's hair. "When you find someone who makes you want to be a better man, who makes you want to build something lasting, that is when you will know what I am talking about." The conversation proved prophetic. As the children grew into young adults, each of them found their own paths, influenced by their parents' example of love and commitment. Samuel became a teacher, following in his mother's footsteps. Rose married a logger and became known throughout the territory for her skill with horses. Thomas studied to become a minister like his great-uncle. And Lily, the youngest, became a midwife, helping bring new life into the world just as Mrs. Potter had brought her and her siblings. Quinton and Amelia watched their children establish their own families with pride and some nostalgia for the years that had passed so quickly. Their house, once filled with the noise of young children, grew quieter, but it was never empty. Grandchildren began to arrive, and the couple found themselves starting over with a new generation. "We are getting old," Quinton said one evening, both of them rocking on the porch and watching Samuel's children play in the yard. His hair was more silver than brown now, and his face showed the lines of 58 years well lived. "We are getting distinguished," Amelia corrected, though her hair was gray and her hands showed the wear of decades of work. She was still beautiful to him, perhaps more so now than when he first met her, because now her beauty was layered with all the years they had shared. "You have regrets?" Quinton asked, a question he had asked many times over the years, always needing reassurance that he had been enough for her. "Not a single one," Amelia said, as she always did, "except perhaps that I did not meet you sooner, but then you needed those years on the trail. They made you who you are." "A reformed wanderer," Quinton said with a slight smile. "A man who knows the value of home," Amelia corrected. "A man who chose love over loneliness, family over freedom. You made the hard choice, Quinton, and look at everything that came from it." She gestured to the yard where their grandchildren played, to the house they had built together, to the land they had cultivated and the community they had served. All of this came from one decision: to stay instead of running, to believe you were worth loving, to trust that the best part of your life might be ahead of you, not behind you. Quinton reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of 40 years of practice. "You were right," he said, "that first night in the garden when you told me to stop running. You were right about everything." "I am usually right," Amelia said with a teasing smile. "You just took a while to realize it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky and listening to the sounds of family around them. This, Quinton thought, was what Samuel would have wanted for him. Not a life of penance and wandering, but a life fully lived, full of love and purpose and connection. Reverend Grace passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by his family. The entire town came to his funeral, testifying to the impact he had made over his decades of service. Quinton spoke at the service, his voice steady despite his grief. "Reverend Grace taught me that it is never too late to change your life," he said, looking out at the crowd. "That redemption is always possible for those brave enough to reach for it. He welcomed a broken man into his home and his family, and he gave me the greatest gift imaginable, the chance to build a new life. I will spend the rest of my days trying to honor his memory by passing that gift forward." Amelia wept as they buried her uncle in the church cemetery, but they were not only tears of grief. "He had a good life," she said, leaning against Quinton. "He did what he set out to do, serve his community and his God and raise me to be a good woman. He has earned his rest." "He was a good man," Quinton agreed. "I wish I could tell him one more time how much he meant to me, how much his faith in me changed everything." "He knew," Amelia assured him. "He knew, and he was proud of you. He told me so many times how grateful he was that I found you, that you found us." Time continued its steady march. Quinton retired from the mill at 60, his body finally feeling the effects of decades of hard labor. But retirement did not mean stopping. He spent his days building furniture for his grandchildren, repairing things around town for neighbors who needed help, and working in the garden with Amelia. They took walks every evening, just as they had when they were courting, talking about the day and their family and their memories. They still slept curled together in the bed he had built when they first married, still reached for each other in the night, still found comfort in simple proximity. You remember the first time we met?" Amelia asked one evening as they walked through the church garden, now maintained by younger volunteers but still beautiful. "You were watering flowers," Quinton said. "The sun was setting and you looked like something out of a dream. I thought I had imagined you at first." "I saw a lonely man who looked like he had forgotten how to hope," Amelia said, "and I wanted to help him remember." "You did more than that," Quinton said, stopping to face her. "You gave me everything: purpose, family, love, a reason to wake up every morning. I was dead inside, Amelia. Walking but dead. And you brought me back to life." "We brought each other to life," Amelia insisted. "I was lonely too, remember, going through the motions but not really living. You gave me passion and adventure and a love story better than anything I had read in books." "I love you," Quinton said, words he had spoken countless times over 43 years of marriage but which never lost their meaning. "More now than ever, more every day." "And I love you," Amelia replied, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "My wandering cowboy who finally came home." They kissed in the garden where they had first talked about dreams and second chances, and Quinton felt the same surge of love and gratitude that he had felt the day he married her. Growing old together was a gift, one he never took for granted. On their 45th wedding anniversary in 1927, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate. The house was full of noise and laughter. 3 generations packed around the large table Quinton had built decades ago. As Quinton looked around at the faces of his family, he felt overwhelmed by the fullness of his life. Samuel, now 44 and a respected educator, raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "who taught us what real love looks like. Not the easy love of new romance, but the enduring love that weathers storms and grows stronger with time. Thank you for showing us how to build a life worth living." The family echoed his toast, glasses clinking, and Quinton felt tears prick his eyes. Amelia squeezed his hand under the table, and he squeezed back. Both of them moved beyond words. Later, after the celebration had wound down and the younger generation had left, Samuel lingered with his parents on the porch. "I found something I want to give you," he said, pulling a worn book from his bag. "I have been researching family history, and I found this." It was a collection of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Quinton recognized his brother Samuel's handwriting on the envelopes and felt his heart clench. "Where did you get these?" "I tracked down Samuel's fiancée, your brother's intended. She is still alive, living with her daughter in Seattle. When I told her about you and our family, she wanted you to have these. They are letters your brother wrote to her during the war." Quinton opened the first letter with shaking hands. His brother's words, preserved across more than 60 years, spoke of hope and dreams for the future. But it was the last letter, written just days before Samuel died at Antietam, that made him break down. "I have a brother named Quinton," Samuel had written. "He is stronger than me, braver than me, better with a gun and better with his fists. But he does not believe in himself the way I believe in him. If something happens to me in this war, I hope he finds a way to forgive himself for surviving. I hope he builds a life full of love and purpose. I hope he knows that he deserves every bit of happiness he can grasp. Tell him, if you get the chance, that I was always proud to be his brother." Quinton wept, the tears of 6 decades flowing freely. Amelia held him while Samuel the younger looked on with tears in his own eyes, understanding that his father had needed this closure for a lifetime. "He was proud of you," Amelia whispered. "He wanted you to be happy. And look at everything you have built, Quinton. Look at this family, this life. You honored his memory by choosing to live fully." "I wish he could have known you," Quinton managed to say. "Could have seen his namesake grow up, could have met all of them." "He knows," Amelia said with certainty. Somehow, somewhere he knows, and he is proud. That night, lying in bed with Amelia, Quinton felt a sense of peace he had never quite achieved before. The guilt he had carried for so long, the sense that he did not deserve his happiness, finally loosened its grip. His brother had wanted this for him. Had known, even in those dark days of war, that Quinton's life mattered, that his future was worth fighting for. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "To Samuel, to Amelia, to God, to the universe itself. Thank you for this life." Quinton and Amelia continued their life together with a renewed sense of peace and gratitude. They traveled a bit in their later years, taking the train to visit their children who had moved to different parts of Washington. They saw the Pacific Ocean together, standing hand in hand on a beach near Seattle, marveling at the endless water. "I used to dream about seeing the ocean," Quinton said, watching waves crash against the shore. "When I was wandering, I thought seeing wonders like this would make me happy." "And does it?" Amelia asked. "Yes," Quinton said, putting his arm around her, "but only because you are here to see it with me. You were right all those years ago. Experiences are richer when they are shared." They returned to Centralia each time with relief, confirming what they had always known. That home was not a place but a feeling, and they carried it with them wherever they went as long as they were together. In the spring of 1931, as Quinton approached his 79th birthday and Amelia her 74th, they took their usual evening walk through town. Centralia had grown and changed over the decades, but the church still stood at the center, and the garden still bloomed with flowers. "We have been blessed," Amelia said, pausing at the fence where Quinton had first seen her all those years ago. "So incredibly blessed." "Beyond what I ever imagined possible," Quinton agreed. His body was frail now, his steps slower, but his heart was full. "I love you, Amelia Drake. You are worth settling down for, worth everything, worth more than all the trails I ever rode. And you, Quinton Drake, are worth every bit of faith I had in you," Amelia replied. "Worth taking a chance on, worth building a life with." They stood in the garden as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, just as it had that first evening 49 years ago. Around them, the town they had helped build continued its rhythms. Children played in yards, neighbors called greetings. The church bell rang for evening service, and two people who had found each other when they both needed finding most stood hand in hand, grateful for every moment, every choice, every step that had led them to this life together. Quinton thought of the young man he had been, broken and lost and certain he would never find home. He thought of the preacher's niece who had seen past his brokenness to the man he could become. Most of all, he thought about the simple truth that had changed everything. Some people are worth settling down for. Some love is worth the risk of staying. Some homes are worth building, even when you have spent years running from the very idea. Quinton and Amelia Drake lived out their final years in the home they had built together, surrounded by a family that continued to grow and thrive. Their great-grandchildren played in the same yard where their grandchildren and children had played before them. The table that Quinton built seated 3 generations at holiday dinners. The garden that Amelia planted continued to bloom under the care of younger hands. Quinton passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Amelia beside him as she had been for more than half a century. His last words to her were the same ones he had spoken countless times. "I love you. You are worth everything." Amelia lived 3 more years, tended lovingly by her children and grandchildren. She spent her final days in the house filled with memories, looking at photographs and telling stories about the wandering cowboy who had ridden into town one summer day and decided to stay. She spoke of his transformation from a broken man to a devoted husband and father, of his kindness and his hard work and his unwavering love. When she passed in her sleep at 80, her family found her with a smile on her face, as if she had gone to meet someone she had been missing. They buried her next to Quinton in the church cemetery, their headstones side by side, united in death as they had been in life. The inscription read, "Quinton and Amelia Drake. He wandered until he found home. She showed him the way. Together they built a legacy of love." Years later, their great-granddaughter would write a book about them, preserving their story for future generations. It became a favorite in the family, passed down and read aloud, a reminder of what was possible when two people chose love over fear, commitment over convenience, and faith over doubt. The story of the wandering cowboy and the preacher's niece became legend in Centralia, a testament to the power of second chances and the transformative nature of love. Young couples would visit their graves, touching the stones for luck, hoping that their own love stories might be as enduring. The house that Quinton built stood for generations, eventually becoming a historical landmark. The garden that Amelia planted continued to bloom. The church roof that Quinton repaired sheltered worshipers for decades. And the family they created together spread throughout Washington and beyond, carrying forward the values they had instilled: hard work, kindness, community, and above all, love. In the end, Quinton Drake's greatest journey was not the 12 years he spent wandering the West, but the 51 years he spent in one place, building a life with the woman who had seen his potential when he could not see it himself. He had been looking for something all those years on the trail, and he had found it in Centralia, in a church garden, in the green eyes of a preacher's niece who believed he was worth saving. She was right. He was worth it. They both were. And the life they built together proved that sometimes the greatest adventure is not in running away but in choosing to stay, in planting roots instead of following horizons, in loving one person deeply instead of experiencing everything shallowly. Quinton Drake came to Centralia planning to stay a week. He stayed a lifetime, and in doing so he finally understood what his brother Samuel had hoped for him, that he would find happiness, build a legacy, and know that his life mattered. He did all of that and more because of Amelia, because of love, because he finally believed he was worth settling down for and she was worth settling down with. Together, they proved that even the most broken hearts can heal, that even the longest journeys can end in home, and that true love is worth whatever it costs to claim it. Their story ended, as all stories must, but the love they created continued long after they were gone, living on in their descendants and in the town they had helped build. And somewhere, perhaps, two souls walked together still, hand in hand, finally at peace, finally home, finally and forever together. The wandering was over. The settling had been worth it. And love, as it always did when it was real and true and lasting, had conquered all.